I spent 33 years being the dependable daughter, the one who never asked for applause, but standing alone in my cap and gown while my parents posted selfies from a Super Bowl party. I finally realized that my silence wasn't keeping the peace. It was just keeping me invisible. I didn't cry or cause a scene. I simply went home, drained my emergency savings, and bought a one-way ticket to a coast I had only ever seen in magazines. The polyester gown felt heavy against my skin, trapping the heat of the packed auditorium. It was a cheap, synthetic material that smelled faintly of industrial storage, but to me, it should have felt like armor. I sat in row G, seat 14, clutching the glossy program so tightly the edges were beginning to curl against my damp palm. Around me, the air buzzed with a specific kind of electric anxiety, the sound of 522 22-year-olds waiting for their lives to begin. I was 33. My life had technically begun a decade ago, but it had been a life of delays. I was the student who took one class a semester because I was working 40 hours a week. I was the daughter who paused her degree twice once when my father threw his back out and couldn't work the register at the hardware store for 3 months. And again when my younger brother, Caleb, needed bail money and a lawyer after a misunderstanding that my parents insisted was not his fault. But today was supposed to be the finish line. I had finally completed the credits. I had paid the tuition fees. I had earned the right to walk across this stage, shake the dean's hand, and accept the piece of paper that proved I was capable of finishing something for myself. I checked my phone again. It was 10:45 in the morning. The ceremony was scheduled to start at 11 sharp. There were 3 empty seats to my left. I had reserved them months ago. My mother had texted at 9 o'clock, running a bit late. Dad couldn't find his good tie. On our way. At 10 o'clock, I had sent a gentle reminder, parking is getting tight. You might want to drop Dad at the front. No reply. Now, with 15 minutes to go. The knot in my stomach was pulling tighter, a familiar sensation that felt less like nervousness and more like the heavy, dull ache of anticipation. I watched the family in the row ahead of me. A mother was fussing over her son's collar, smoothing it down with aggressive affection, while his father held up a bulky camera, snapping photos of the back of his head. They were annoying, loud, and taking up too much space. I envied them so much it made my teeth ache. My phone buzzed in my lap. I snatched it up, expecting a text saying they were parking, or that they were lost looking for the entrance. It was a notification from social media. Elaine Russell tagged you in a post. I swiped the screen open, my thumb hovering over the glass. A picture loaded. It was bright, high definition, and loud with color. It was a selfie. My mother was in the foreground, wearing her favorite sequined Eagles jersey, her face flushed with excitement. Behind her, the living room of a house I didn't recognize was decked out in green and silver streamers. There was a massive spread of food trays of wings, sliders, dips, and a cooler focused in the corner. My father was in the background, laughing with a beer in his hand, high-fiving one of Caleb's friends. Caleb was there too, wearing a jersey that cost more than my car payment. Pointing at the massive 60-inch television mounted on the wall, the caption read, "Super Bowl Sunday with the boys, nothing beats family priorities on game day. Go Birds." I stared at the timestamp, posted 2 minutes ago. The noise of the auditorium seemed to drop away, sucked into a vacuum of sudden, ringing silence. I looked at the time on my phone. 10:48. They weren't in traffic. They weren't looking for a parking spot. They weren't even in the car. They were 40 minutes away, at a party hosted by one of Caleb's new flashy friends, eating dip and waiting for a football game that wouldn't even start for another 7 hours. I read the caption again. Family priorities. The words sat on the screen, innocuous and cheerful to anyone else. But to me, they were a precise, surgical strike. I looked at the empty seats beside me. I had paid for those tickets. I had sent them the directions 3 times. I had bought a new dress to wear under the gown so we could go to a nice lunch afterward, a lunch I had reserved at a bistro downtown, putting down a $50 deposit I couldn't really afford. They hadn't forgotten. You don't forget a graduation you have been hearing about for 6 months. They had simply chosen a woman next to me, a girl really, probably 21, glanced at me with a sympathetic smile. Is your family stuck in the parking garage? She asked. It is a nightmare out there. I looked at her. Her eyes were bright, unclouded by the specific fatigue of being the Russell family's designated shock absorber. No, I said, my voice sounding calm, almost detached. They are not stuck. They just are not coming. Oh, she said, her face falling. I am so sorry. It is fine. I lied. The music started the heavy, pompous brass of pomp and circumstance. Everyone stood up. I stood up with them. I walked where the ushers told me to walk. I sat where they told me to sit. When they called my name, Violet Marie Russell, I walked across the stage. I didn't look out into the audience. I knew what I would find there, a sea of strangers, clapping politely for a woman they didn't know. While 3 plastic seats sat empty in row G, I shook the hand of a man who smelled like peppermint and old paper. He smiled at me, a practiced, automatic grimace. Congratulations, he said. Thank you, I said. I didn't stop to take professional photos. I didn't linger in the lobby where families were hugging and presenting bouquets of flowers wrapped in cellophane. I walked straight out to the side exit, into the humid afternoon air. I walked to my 10-year-old sedan, unlocked the door, and sat in the driver's seat. The silence inside the car was absolute. I looked at my diploma in its fake leather cover. It felt light, insignificant. I held up my phone and opened the camera. I angled it so the sunlight hit my face, hiding the shadows under my eyes. I smiled a tight, closed-mouth expression that didn't reach my eyes and snapped one photo. I didn't post it. I just saved it to my camera roll. A piece of evidence that I had been here, that I had done this. Then I started the car and drove home. My apartment was quiet. It was a 1-bedroom on the 2nd floor of a complex that had seen better days, but it was mine. I had painted the walls a soft cream color to cover the landlord's special beige, and I kept it meticulously clean because chaos made my skin crawl. I took off the gown and hung it in the closet. I changed into sweatpants and a t-shirt. I sat on my couch and stared at the wall. At 6:30 in the evening, my phone rang. It was my mother. I watched the screen light up. Mom, a word that was supposed to mean safety, but lately felt more like an obligation. I let it ring 4 times before I picked it up. Hello, I said. Violet, honey. I am so sorry. Her voice was breathless, frantic, but with an underlying current of distraction. I could hear the roar of a television in the background and the shouting of men. It is fine, I said. No, it is not fine. It was a disaster today. You know how traffic gets on the interstate when there is a game. We were sitting there for an hour, and then Caleb got a call from his boss, the guy who runs that dealership. He invited us over, and your father thought it would be rude to say no since Caleb is trying to get that promotion. I closed my eyes. Caleb worked at a used car lot. He wasn't up for a promotion. He was barely hanging on to the job because he kept showing up late. So you went to a party, I said. It wasn't a party. Violet, it was networking. For your brother. You know how hard he has been trying. We figured you would understand. It is just a ceremony. Right? You still got the degree. We can do dinner next week. Maybe Tuesday. No. Wait. Tuesday is your father's bowling league. Wednesday. They didn't ask if I walked. They didn't ask if I cried. They didn't ask if I was alone. I saw the photos. Mom, I said, the Super Bowl party. There was a pause on the other end. A short, sharp intake of breath. Then, the tone shifted. It went from apologetic to defensive in a heartbeat. Well, we had to make the best of it. Violet, we were already dressed up. What were we supposed to do? Sit in the car and mope. Don't be dramatic. We are celebrating you in spirit. We are toasting you right now. I heard my father's voice in the background. Ask her if she picked up the dry cleaning for tomorrow. My mother cleared her throat. Did you hear your dad? He needs his suit for the council meeting tomorrow. Since you were out that way at the university, he thought maybe you grabbed it. I looked at my hand. It was shaking. just a tiny tremor in the fingers. I did not pick up the dry cleaning. I said, "Oh." The disappointment was palpable. "Well, okay. I guess he will just have to wear the gray one." "Look, honey, the halftime show is starting. We are so proud of you, really. We will call you tomorrow. Love you." The line went dead. I sat there for a long time, listening to the silence of my apartment. It was heavy, oppressive. "We figured you would understand." That was the sentence. That was the epitaph on the tombstone of my relationship with them. Violet will understand. Violet always understands. Violet is the reliable one. Violet doesn't need attention. Violet is fine. I stood up and walked to my small desk in the corner of the living room. I opened my laptop and logged into my bank account. I had been saving for 3 years. I called it my just-in-case fund. It wasn't a fortune, but it was significant to me. $7,000. I had scraped it together by skipping vacations, cooking cheap meals, and driving a car that rattled when it went over 50 miles an hour. In my head, that money was for them. It was for when my dad's back finally gave out for good. For when Caleb inevitably got into trouble that required a lawyer with a retainer. For when the roof on their house needed patching because they spent their maintenance money on cruises and big-screen TVs. I looked at the number on the screen. $7,412. I thought about the dry cleaning. I thought about the 3 empty seats. I thought about the $50 deposit I had lost at the bistro. I thought about my 10th birthday, when they forgot to pick me up from school because Caleb had a minor league baseball tryout. I sat on the curb for 3 hours until the janitor let me use the office phone. I thought about the time I got a promotion at the insurance agency, and when I told them, my father interrupted me to complain about the price of gas. I thought about the emergency contact forms I filled out at the doctor's office. I always listed them. They listed Caleb. I am not a daughter. I whispered to the empty room. I am an insurance policy. The realization didn't come with hot, fiery rage. It came with a cold, clear stillness. I wasn't angry. I was done. I was completely, utterly hollowed out. The tank was empty. There was nothing left to give. I opened a new tab on my browser. I had always wanted to go to the coast, not the tourist traps in Florida where my parents went, but the Pacific Northwest, or maybe somewhere vaguely northern and misty. I searched for flights, departing tomorrow. I found a flight to a city called Port Haven. It was a mid-sized coastal city 3,000 miles away. I didn't know anything about it other than it was near the ocean and it wasn't here. The ticket was $400 one way. My finger hovered over the mouse. My brain, the logical, responsible part of my brain that had kept me alive and stable for 33 years, screamed at me, "This is irresponsible. You have a job. You have a lease. You have obligations. What if they need you?" Then I looked at the social media tab still open on my phone, the picture of my mother laughing, wearing the jersey, holding a plate of nachos. Family priorities. I clicked purchase. The confirmation screen popped up. Your flight is confirmed. I didn't feel panic. I felt a strange, lightheaded sensation, like I had just stepped off a ledge and discovered gravity didn't work the way I thought it did. I stood up and went to my bedroom. I pulled my suitcase out from under the bed. I didn't pack everything. I didn't want everything. I packed 7 days of clothes, my laptop, my toiletries, my sturdy boots, the few books that actually meant something to me. I looked at the rest of the apartment, the furniture I had assembled myself, the plants I had watered, the life I had carefully, painstakingly built to be respectable and stable. I walked to the kitchen counter. I took a piece of notepad paper and a blue pen. I wrote a note. Mom and Dad, I am taking some time. Do not worry about the dry cleaning. I am sure Caleb can handle it. Violet. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a manifesto of my pain. It was just a fact. I left the key to the apartment on top of the note. My lease was month to month. I would email the landlord from the airport and tell him to keep the security deposit. I carried my suitcase downstairs to my car. It was 3 a.m. The air was cool and smelled of damp pavement. I drove to the long-term parking lot at the airport. I parked the car in the furthest corner. I left the registration in the glove box. Inside the terminal, everything was bright and artificial. I checked my bag, I went through security, I sat at the gate and watched the sun start to bleed gray light over the runway. I took my phone out one last time. I went to the settings, location sharing. I saw the little icons for my mother, my father, and Caleb. They tracked me. They always wanted to know where I was. Not because they cared, but because they wanted to know how close I was to solving their problems. I tapped the button. Stop sharing location. A warning popped up. People will be notified that you have stopped sharing your location. Good. I thought. I powered the phone down completely. Boarding began. I walked down the jet bridge, the wheels of my carry-on humming against the floor. I found my seat. 22A, by the window. As the plane taxied and the engines roared to life, a wave of nausea hit me. The guilt. It was a physical thing, a heavy stone in my gut. Who will help Dad with his taxes? Who will remind Mom to take her blood pressure medication? Who will talk Caleb down when he gets fired again? The plane accelerated. The force pushed me back into the seat. We lifted off. The ground fell away the highway, the suburbs, the hardware store, the car lot, the apartment complex. It all turned into a grid of meaningless lights. And then, just as quickly as the guilt had come, it vanished. It was replaced by something terrifying and exhilarating. Silence. No one knew where I was. No one could ask me for anything. No one was waiting for me to fix a mistake I didn't make. I rested my head against the cool plastic of the window and closed my eyes. For the first time in 33 years, I wasn't Violet the daughter, or Violet the sister, or Violet the fixer. I was just a body in a seat. Flying west, Port Haven was gray. That was my first impression as the taxi wound its way from the airport into the city. A persistent, drizzling mist hung over everything, blurring the edges of the buildings and slicking the streets with a silver sheen. To most people, it might have looked dreary. To me, it looked like a sanctuary. I had the driver drop me off at a place I had found on my phone while waiting for my luggage. The Harborview Extended Stay. It sounded fancy, but it was a 2-story motel with exterior corridors and a neon sign that buzzed audibly. It was clean, though, and it was cheap. I paid the driver in cash. I checked in under my own name. I wasn't trying to disappear from the law. Just for my family. The clerk, a bored-looking man with a nose ring, didn't even look up from his tablet as he handed me a plastic keycard. Room 112, he said. No smoking. Checkout is at 11. I dragged my suitcase into the room. It smelled of lemon polish and stale ocean air. There was a kitchenette with a microwave and a mini fridge. A small table with 2 chairs, and a bed with a floral comforter that looked like it belonged in 1995. I sat on the edge of the bed. I turned my phone back on. 37 notifications, 14 texts from Mom, 6 from Dad, 3 from Caleb, 12 missed calls. I didn't read them. I didn't listen to the voicemails. I went into the settings and set my phone to Do Not Disturb, allowing calls only from contacts I didn't have yet. I needed a job. I couldn't burn through my $7,000 and end up destitute. I needed routine. I needed to be busy so I wouldn't have time to think about what I had just done. I opened my laptop and searched for temp agencies in Port Haven. I found one called City Staffing Solutions, a few blocks away. I showered, washing the airplane air off my skin. I put on the one blazer I had packed, a navy blue fitted jacket that made me look professional and severe. I pulled my hair back into a tight bun. I walked to the agency in the drizzle. I liked the rain on my face. It felt real. The woman at the agency, a kind-faced lady named Brenda, looked at my resume. You have a lot of experience, she said, raising an eyebrow. Operations management, logistics, payroll. Are you sure you want temp work? We have some permanent positions that Noah... I interrupted. Just temp work. Please. Short-term projects. I am in a transition period. She nodded slowly, not prying. Okay. Well, we have a request that just came in this morning. A small event management company downtown. They are drowning in paperwork for a spring festival, and their office manager just went on maternity leave early. It is mostly data entry, vendor coordination, answering phones, not glamorous. I will take it. I said, "Can you start tomorrow?" "I can start today," I said. She smiled. "All right then." Walking out of that office, I felt a strange sensation in my chest. My lungs expanded fully. The knot that had been in my stomach since I was 16 years old loosened. Just a fraction. I walked down the street, surrounded by strangers. No one looked at me. No one knew my history. No one knew that I was the girl whose parents skipped her graduation for a football party. Here, I was just a woman in a navy blazer walking through the rain. I stopped at a small bakery and bought a coffee and a scone. I sat on a bench under an awning and ate it slowly. It was the first meal I had eaten in 24 hours. I was 3,000 miles from home. I had no car, no apartment, and no plan beyond the next week. I took a sip of the hot coffee. I had never felt more secure in my life. The rain in Port Haven was different from the rain back home. Back home. Rain was an event, a thunderstorm that rattled the windows, or a dreary, cold downpour that turned the lawns into mud pits. Here, the rain was a constant, polite companion. It was a fine mist that hung in the air like a veil, softening the sharp edges of the buildings and muffling the sounds of traffic. It didn't demand attention. It just was. My life had become like that rain. I had been in the city for 2 weeks. I had established a routine that was so quiet, so devoid of drama, that my ears sometimes rang with the phantom sounds of my old life. I woke up at 6 in the morning, not because my father was banging around in the kitchen looking for his back medicine, but because the seagulls outside my motel window started their daily argument. I made coffee in the small plastic machine on the kitchenette counter. I drank it while sitting at the small round table, looking out at the gray parking lot. Nobody called me. That was the hardest part to adjust to. For 33 years, my phone had been a leash. It was the device that delivered the crises. Caleb got pulled over. Dad needs a ride to the specialist. Mom is crying because the neighbor said something rude about her hedges. Every vibration had triggered a spike of cortisol, a physical preparation for labor. Now, my phone sat on the table, face down, silent. I had set it to do not disturb for everyone except my new employer and the motel front desk. I checked it once a day, at 8 in the evening, just to ensure no one had died. I finished my coffee, washed the mug, and dried it immediately. I put on my navy blazer, which I had had dry cleaned at a shop down the street, and walked 4 blocks to the offices of Coastal Events. The office was a converted warehouse with exposed brick walls and high ceilings. It smelled of coffee and paper. My job was not complicated. I was filling in for the office manager, a woman named Linda who had gone into labor 6 weeks early. My tasks involved answering the phone, organizing vendor contracts for the upcoming Spring Maritime Festival, and making sure the event coordinators had their schedules. It was the kind of work I could do in my sleep. Back home, I had managed the entire logistics schedule for a mid-sized insurance firm while simultaneously managing my parents' chaotic personal lives. Organizing a few catering contracts was restful by comparison. "Good morning, Violet." I looked up. It was Sarah, one of the senior event coordinators. She was a woman about my age with messy curly hair and paint stains on her jeans. She was holding 2 coffees. "Good morning." "Sarah," I said. "I brought you a latte," she said, setting a cardboard cup on my desk. "I noticed yesterday you were drinking the break room sludge. Nobody deserves that." I stared at the cup. It was from the nice cafe around the corner. It probably cost $6. "Oh," I said, feeling a sudden, awkward heat in my cheeks. "You didn't have to do that. I can pay you for it." I reached for my purse, but Sarah waved her hand dismissively. "Don't be ridiculous. You saved my hide yesterday with that tent rental mix-up. If you hadn't caught that double booking, I would be explaining to the mayor why his VIP reception was happening in the rain. Consider this a small tribute to your competence." She smiled and walked away to her desk. I sat there, staring at the latte. A tribute to my competence. At home, my competence was invisible. It was expected. If I fixed a problem, I was doing my job as the daughter. If I failed to fix a problem, I was selfish or lazy. There was no middle ground, and there was certainly no gratitude. Here, I had caught a clerical error on a spreadsheet, and someone had bought me a premium coffee. I took a sip. It was warm and sweet. I felt a strange pricking in my eyes, which I quickly blinked away. I turned back to my computer monitor and opened the vendor database. I focused on the work. I focused on the quiet. I focused on the fact that for 8 hours, nobody would ask me to apologize for something I didn't do. By the middle of the 3rd week, the messages from my parents had shifted. I sat on my bed in the motel room, the heavy curtains drawn against the evening gloom, and opened the text thread. I had not replied since the day I left, but I read them. It was like studying a specimen under a microscope. The first few days had been confusion. Violet, are you at work? Dad called your office and they said you resigned. What is going on? Did you go on a trip? You didn't mention a trip. Caleb went by your apartment. The landlord said you paid through the month but you aren't there. Call us immediately. Then, the guilt began to seep in. Thick and performative. Your father is worried sick. His blood pressure is up again. Do you want him to end up in the hospital? I haven't slept in 2 nights. I just don't understand why you would disappear like this. We are a family. We talk about things. Please, honey, just let us know you are alive. We are terrified. And now, today. The tone had curdled into the subtle, sharp-edged blame that I knew so well. This is incredibly selfish. Violet, we have been calling everyone. Do you know how embarrassing it is to tell your aunt we don't know where you are? Caleb needs his tax documents. You have the folder. He can't file without them. You are holding him up. How could you do this to us, after everything we have done for you? I read that last one 3 times. After everything we have done for you, I tried to list those things in my head. They had raised me, yes. They had put food on the table. But since I was 22, the flow of resources had gone almost entirely in the opposite direction. I had paid off their credit card debt twice. I had co-signed the loan for the car Caleb wrecked. I had managed their medical appointments, their home repairs, their social disputes. I typed a response. My thumbs hovered over the keys. I deleted 3 drafts. I didn't want to engage in an argument. Arguments with my parents were like quicksand. The more you struggled to explain your side, the deeper you sank into their reality. I wrote, I am safe. I am working. I am not coming back right now. I will not discuss where I am or when I am returning until you are ready to acknowledge that you skipped my graduation to go to a Super Bowl party. I hit send. I watched the screen. The 3 little dots appeared instantly. My mother was typing. Oh, Violet, don't be like that. You know that isn't what happened. It was a misunderstanding. We can't talk about this over text. Pick up the phone. She was rewriting history in real time. A misunderstanding. I didn't reply. I put the phone back on the table. Face down. I felt a tremor in my hands. Not of fear, but of adrenaline. I had set a boundary, a real tangible wall. They had walked right into it, and instead of opening the gate, I had reinforced the lock. 2 days later, on a Thursday, Sarah stopped by my desk again. Hey, she said, a few of us are going to get dinner at the noodle place down the street after work. Nothing fancy. You want to come? My immediate reflex was to say no. Thursday nights were usually when I went to my parents' house to help them sort their mail and pay their bills. Even though I was 3,000 miles away, the muscle memory of Thursday is for family chores was still there. Also, I was on a strict budget. I was watching every dollar of my dwindling savings. I don't know, I said. I have some things to catch up on. Sarah leaned against the doorframe. Violet, you have organized the entire vendor file in 2 weeks. It used to take Linda 2 months. You are caught up. Come on. You have been in this city for almost a month, and I bet the only place you have seen is this office and your motel room. She was right. Okay, I said. I will come. The restaurant was loud, crowded, and smelled of ginger and garlic. We sat at a long communal table, Sarah, me, and 2 guys from the audiovisual team, Mark and David. The conversation flowed in a way that felt foreign to me. They talked about movies, They talked about the weirdest things they had seen at festivals. They debated the best pizza in the city. Nobody complained about their health. Nobody asked for money. Nobody started a passive-aggressive argument about who had done more for whom. "So, Violet?" Mark asked, dipping a dumpling into soy sauce. "What brought you to Port Haven? You are not from here, right?" "Your accent is different." I froze for a second. I had prepared a cover story. "I just needed a change," I said, keeping it vague. "I lived in the same town my whole life. I wanted to see the ocean." "That is cool." David said, "I moved here 5 years ago from the Midwest. Best decision I ever made. The winters there were soul-crushing. They didn't pry. They didn't ask why I needed a change. They just accepted my presence as a valid fact." Sarah turned to me. "You are really good at the logistics stuff. You know, Henderson is already terrified of the day Linda comes back. He said yesterday that he's never seen the permits filed this early." I felt that warmth in my cheeks again. It is just organization. I said, "It is about anticipating what could go wrong." "And you are good at that?" Sarah asked. "Anticipating disaster." I looked down at my bowl of noodles. "I am an expert at it. The dinner cost me $18. I paid it without guilt." We walked out into the cool night air, laughing about a story Mark had told regarding a runaway inflatable mascot. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a resource. I didn't feel like a tool to be used. I felt like a person who had eaten dinner. It was a simple, profound realization. I had been starving for this, not for food, but for the low stakes, easy rhythm of people who wanted nothing from me but my company. The unraveling began on a Saturday morning. I was sitting at the small table in my motel room, doing my weekly budget. I had my bank website open on my laptop. I was meticulous about this. I knew exactly how much the motel cost, how much I spent on food, and how much was left in the just-in-case fund. I had $6,800 left. I was being careful. I scrolled through the transaction history. Harborview Motel, $350 City Market, $42.15 Coastal Coffee, $6.50 transfer. Family Acti Reimb, $45. I stopped. I stared at the line item. Transfer. Family Acti Reimb, $45. I didn't recognize it. I hadn't transferred $45 to anyone. I clicked on the transaction details. It was an automated clearinghouse transfer, dated yesterday. I frowned. I scrolled back to the previous month. There it was again, January 12th. Transfer. Family account RMB, $42. I felt a cold prickle on the back of my neck. I scrolled back to December. December 10th. Transfer. Family Acti Reimb, $38.50. I went back a full year, every single month, on irregular dates, for irregular amounts, $30 here, $50 there, never enough to trigger the large transaction alert I had set for anything over $100. Always labeled, Family Account Reimbursed. I pulled out my phone and called the customer service number on the back of my debit card. I waited on hold for 20 minutes. The hold music was a cheerful, synthesized jazz that grated against my nerves. Finally, a human voice answered. "Bank customer service. This is Jason. How can I help you?" "Hi," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I am looking at my statement. There are recurring transfers labeled Family Act Reimb that I don't recognize. I need to know where this money is going." "One moment. Let me verify your security questions." I answered the questions. My mother's maiden name, the name of my first pet. "Okay. Ms. Russell," Jason said. "I see the transactions. These are internal transfers to account number ending in 4492. I don't have an account ending in 4492. I said, "My savings ends in 8100. "1 second, Jason said. "Ah, I see. This is a joint checking account. The primary holder is listed as Elaine Russell. With you listed as a secondary joint owner, the transfers are being initiated from that account, pulling funds from your personal checking." The world seemed to tilt slightly to the left, a joint account. I closed my eyes and dug through the sediment of my memory. when I was 22. Freshly graduated from college the first time before I went back for the degree they ignored, my mother had suggested we open a joint account. For emergencies, she had said. So if you ever get stuck somewhere, we can transfer money to you instantly. I had agreed. I had signed the paper. We put $50 in it. I had never used it. I had completely forgotten it existed. They are pulling the money, I asked. How it looks like an automated draw setup, Jason explained. But since the amounts vary, someone is likely logging in and manually scheduling the transfer, or it is linked to a bill pay system. It is labeled reimbursement, which is just a user-defined tag. I did the math in my head. $40 a month, for 10 years. That was nearly $5,000. $5,000 siphoned out of my account, drop by drop, while I was saving for a house I never bought, driving a car that was falling apart, and paying for their dinners, and they kept the amount small, deliberately small, under the radar. They knew. They knew I checked the big numbers. They knew I watched for fraud. So they stole from me in increments that looked like a subscription I had forgotten to cancel. I felt sick, physically nauseous. It wasn't the money, though. The money mattered. It was the intimacy of the theft. They had been inside my finances, watching my balance, and skimming off the top like I was a cash register they owned. Can you stop it? I asked. I can put a stop payment on this specific transfer ID, Jason said. But since you are a joint owner on the destination account, the other owner can technically set it up again. Your best bet is to remove yourself from the joint account or close your personal account and open a new one with a new number. Close it, I said. Close my personal account. Open a new one. Right now. Are you sure? This will decline any outstanding checks or I don't care. Close it. We spent an hour on the phone. I moved my entire savings and checking balance to a new account number. I set up a new password. I set up two-factor authentication. I felt like I was fortifying a bunker. When I hung up, I sat in the silence of the room. My heart was hammering against my ribs. I picked up my phone. I didn't text this time. I called. My mother answered on the second ring. Violet, oh, thank God. We have been so worried. I told your father who is paying the cable bill. Mom, I asked. My voice was low, terrifyingly calm. What are you talking about? The cable bill? Or maybe the water bill? Or maybe it is just pizza money? The $40 or $50 you take out of my account every month? The account ending in 4492? There was a silence on the other end. A thick, heavy silence. It wasn't the silence of confusion. It was the silence of being caught. Violet, honey, you are sounding very paranoid. I don't know what... Don't lie to me. I said, I just got off the phone with the bank. I know about the joint account. I know you have been initiating transfers. For years. The silence stretched again. Then, my mother's voice changed. The worry vanished. The confusion vanished. What replaced it was a sharp, defensive tone that I had heard her use on customer service representatives and neighbors she didn't like. Well, honestly, Violet, you are making a mountain out of a molehill. You stole money from me. I said, stole. She let out a short, incredulous laugh. That is a horrible word to use on your own mother. We didn't steal anything. That account was for family emergencies, and things have been tight. You know that. You know how much your father's medication costs. I looked at the text from the graduation day, Super Bowl Sunday. Huge spread of food. You spent $200 on wings and beer for Caleb's friends 2 weeks ago. I said, that was different. That was for your brother's career. Look, Violet, it was $40 here and there. You make good money. You never even missed it. It was basically your money in the family anyway. What is yours is ours. That is how families work. We raised you. We paid for your braces. We paid for your dance lessons when you were 6. You are going to nickel and dime us over a few dollars. Basically your money in the family anyway. The entitlement was breathtaking. It was a vast, bottomless pit. They didn't see me as a separate person. They saw me as an extension of themselves, a limb that they could harvest resources from whenever they felt a pinch. I closed the account. Mom, I said. What? Her voice pitched up. I closed my personal account, and I removed my name from the joint account. You can't pull another cent. If you try, it will bounce. And if you try to use my identity to open another one, I will file a police report. You wouldn't dare. Violet, you are acting crazy. You are having a breakdown. This is that coastal city influencing you. You need to come home. We can talk about this. I am not coming home. I said, and I am not having a breakdown. I am finally doing the math. Violet, if you cut us off, your father. I hung up. I stared at the phone. My hand was shaking so hard, I almost dropped it. I felt powerful. It was a surge of adrenaline that made my vision sharp. I had stopped the leak. I had closed the gate. But beneath the power, I felt sick, a deep, churning nausea in my gut. Because she hadn't denied it. She hadn't apologized. She had justified it. She genuinely believed that my money was her money. She believed that my autonomy was a clerical error that she had the right to correct. They hadn't just skipped my graduation. They had been eating my life, bite by bite, for a decade. And they were angry that I had finally pulled the plate away. I walked to the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face. I looked at myself in the mirror. I looked pale, tired, but my eyes were clear. The betrayal wasn't the amount. $45 wouldn't bankrupt me. The betrayal was the assumption, the absolute certainty they possessed that I would never notice, or that if I did, I would never protest. They banked on my silence. They invested in my passivity. I dried my face with the scratchy motel towel. I walked back into the main room and sat down at the table. I opened my laptop again. I started a new spreadsheet. Assets, liabilities, legal exposure. If they were willing to steal $40 a month. What else had they done? What else had I signed when I was 22 and trusting? What other doors had I left unlocked? I wasn't just a daughter anymore. I was an investigator. And I was going to find everything. I treated my life like a crime scene that needed to be secured. That was the mindset I adopted in the third week of my exile in Port Haven. I wasn't just living day to day anymore. I was building a perimeter. I found a financial counselor named Marcus, a man with a tidy office in a strip mall between a laundromat and a tax preparation service. He wore suspenders without irony and spoke with a soothing, rhythmic cadence that made discussions about credit scores feel like guided meditation. We sat at his desk, which was clear of everything except a computer monitor and a stress ball shaped like a globe. So, let me make sure I understand the goal, Marcus said, folding his hands. You want to lock everything down. Not just monitor it, you want to make it impenetrable. Yes, I said. I want it so that if anyone tries to open a credit card, take out a loan, or even look at my credit report without my explicit thumbprint and a blood sample. A siren goes off. Marcus smiled slightly. We can't do the siren, but we can do the rest. We spent 2 hours going through the bureaucracy of credit freezes. We contacted the 3 major bureaus. I created pins that were random strings of numbers I had to write down in a physical notebook because they were impossible to memorize. I opted out of pre-screened credit offers. I set up alerts that would text me if my social security number was used to apply for so much as a store loyalty card. Watching Marcus type. Watching the little green confirmation boxes pop up on his screen. I felt a physical weight lifting off my chest. It wasn't happiness I wasn't happy yet, but it was safety. For years. My financial life had felt like a house with the windows left open, where I just hoped nobody would climb in. Now, I was boarding up the glass. You have a very strong credit history. Violet, Marcus noted. Scrolling through my report. 790. That is impressive for someone your age with student loans. I paid them on time. I said, I paid everything on time. I didn't tell him that I paid everything on time because I was terrified of what would happen if I didn't. In my family, financial instability was a contagion. My parents were always one missed paycheck away from a crisis, and I had learned early that if I fell, there would be no one to catch me. I had to be the net. When I walked out of Marcus's office, the Port Haven mist had turned into a steady, cold drizzle. I buttoned my coat and walked to the bus stop. I had sold my car back home, or rather, I had left it at the airport and mailed the keys and title to a dealership with instructions to sell it and wire me the funds. It was a terrible financial decision, losing value like that. But I wanted to sever the registration link. I didn't want my parents running the license plate. I stood under the bus shelter, watching the gray water run into the gutter. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was an email notification. Subject, concern for your well-being. From Richard Russell, my father. I debated not opening it. I could just delete it. I could mark it as spam. But the investigator in me, the part of me that was now gathering evidence rather than absorbing blows, needed to know what they were saying. I opened it. Violet, your mother and I are writing this because we are deeply worried about your mental state. We have been speaking with people, and it is clear that you are spiraling. This erratic behavior, running away, cutting off your family, making wild accusations about money, is not you. It suggests a break from reality. We know you have been under a lot of stress with work and school. We forgive you for the hurtful things you said on the phone. We know you are not yourself right now. Please, let us help you. We can find a doctor. We can handle your affairs until you are back on your feet. We are just trying to protect you from making mistakes you can't undo. Love, Dad. I read it twice. The old Violet, the one who lived in the apartment with the cream-colored walls and the just-in-case fund, would have cried. She would have called them immediately, apologizing, trying to prove she was sane, trying to prove she was good. The new Violet stood in the rain and felt a cold, hard knot of recognition in her stomach. He wasn't writing this to me. He was writing this for the record. He was creating a paper trail, if I ever tried to expose them, if I ever tried to tell people about the graduation or the stolen money. He could pull up this email. See, he would say, we were worried about her. She was having a breakdown. She was paranoid. It was gaslighting. Drafted on a desktop computer and signed with love. I didn't reply. I simply moved the email into a folder I had named Documentation. 2 days later, the narrative my father was constructing moved from his inbox to the real world. I was at work, organizing a catering manifest for the Seafood Cider Festival, when my phone lit up with a message from a number I didn't have saved, but recognized. It was Mrs. Gable, the elderly woman who lived in 2B, directly across the hall from my old apartment. Mrs. Gable was the kind of neighbor who watered your plants when you were gone without asking and left homemade banana bread on your doormat on holidays. Violet, dear. The text read, I hope I am not overstepping. I just wanted to send my love and prayers. Your mother stopped by to pick up some mail that slipped under your door. She told me about the facility. I am so sorry you are struggling, but I'm glad you are getting the help you need. Mental health is nothing to be ashamed of. Take all the time you need to rest. I stared at the screen until the pixels seemed to blur. The facility. My hands went cold. I typed back, my fingers moving stiffly. Mrs. Gable. What exactly did my mother say? The reply came a minute later. Oh, honey, she just said you had a nervous breakdown after graduation, that the stress was too much and you needed to go to a specialized treatment center for a while. She said they are managing your phone for you. So I was surprised to see you typing. Is everything okay? I set the phone down on my desk. The sounds of the office, the printer whirring. Sarah laughing on a call. The rain tapping against the warehouse windows faded into a dull roar. They hadn't just told people I was on a trip. They hadn't just said I moved. They were telling people I was institutionalized. It was brilliant, in a sick, twisted way. It explained my sudden disappearance. It explained why I wasn't answering calls. It garnered them sympathy, the poor, suffering parents dealing with their daughter's mental collapse. And most importantly, it preemptively discredited anything I might say in the future. If I came back and said, they stole from me, everyone would think, poor Violet, she is still delusional. I felt a wave of nausea, but I forced it down. I picked up the phone and typed a response to Mrs. Gable. Mrs. Gable, thank you for telling me. Please listen to me carefully. I am not in a facility. I am fine. I moved to a new city for a job. My parents are lying to you because they are embarrassed that I cut contact with them. I am safe, I am healthy, and I am free. Please do not give them any information about me. I saw the typing bubble appear, then disappear, then appear again. Oh my. She finally wrote, I believe you, dear. You always were the steady one. That is very disturbing. I won't say a word. I locked my phone. I sat there for a long time, looking at the spreadsheet of catering orders, crab cakes, clam chowder, apple tartlets, the mundane details of a normal life. I realized then that I wasn't dealing with difficult parents. I was dealing with adversaries. They were willing to burn my reputation to the ground to keep their own warm. That evening, my brother called. I was sitting on the floor of my motel room, eating a sandwich I had made from grocery store supplies, when I saw Caleb on the caller ID. My thumb hovered over the decline button. I hadn't spoken to him since the graduation, but curiosity, that dangerous thing, won out. I wanted to hear his version of the script. Hello, Caleb, I said. Vi. Oh, hey. You answered? His voice sounded surprised. He sounded like he always did, slightly breathless, like he had just run up a flight of stairs. I answered. I said, Look, Mom and Dad are going crazy. Vi, they are saying some wild stuff. Mom is telling people you are in rehab or something. I told her that was messed up. But you know how she gets when she panics. He was playing the ally, the good guy stuck in the middle. It was a role he had perfected over 30 years. I am just the kid. Vi. You know how they are? They are lying. Caleb, I said, they are destroying my reputation to cover their tracks. Yeah, I know. That is why I'm calling. You need to call them and smooth it over. Just give them something. Tell them you are okay. Apologize for leaving without saying goodbye. If you just apologize, they will calm down and stop the rumors. Apologize. I repeated the word. It tasted like ash. Apologize for what? For graduating, or for leaving after they didn't show up. Caleb sighed. A long, exasperated sound. Come on. Vi, don't start this. You know it wasn't personal. It was the Super Bowl. And it wasn't just a party. It looked like a party. I said, there were streamers. There were wings. It was networking. Caleb's voice sharpened, losing the sympathetic veneer. Mr. Henderson was there, the guy who owns the chain of dealerships. I have been trying to get FaceTime with him for 6 months. He invited me. He specifically said, bring the family. What was I supposed to do, say no say? Sorry, my sister is wearing a hat today. I can't come make the biggest connection of my career. I went silent. The truth hung in the air between us, vibrating. There it was. My graduation, 5 years of night classes, full-time work, exhaustion, and determination was wearing a hat. It wasn't that they forgot. It wasn't that they didn't care. It was that they did the math. They weighed my milestone against Caleb's potential access to a man who owned car dealerships, and the scale tipped instantly. I was a known quantity. I was Violet. I would always be there. Caleb was the investment that needed constant tending. So you chose, I said softly. We did it for the family. Caleb snapped. If I get this management spot, I can help out more. I can take some of the pressure off Dad. You are so selfish. Vi, you always think everything is about you. You leave town. You ghost us. And now I have to deal with Mom crying every night because you are throwing a tantrum. I am not throwing a tantrum. Caleb, I am throwing a life raft, and I'm the only one on it. Whatever. Just call them. You are making me look bad. Henderson asked where my lovely family was yesterday, and I had to lie and say you were sick. You are embarrassing me. He hung up. I put the phone down. I didn't feel the sting I expected. In the past, Caleb's anger would have crushed me. I would have scrambled to fix it. I would have apologized for being difficult. Now, I just felt a clinical detachment. You are making me look bad. That was the core of it. My absence was an inconvenience to his brand. I finished my sandwich. I washed the plate. I wiped down the table. I was done being the backdrop for their play. The next morning, I took the bus to the local community college. It was a small campus, a collection of brick buildings huddled under the gray sky. I walked into the administration building and found the continuing education office. I want to look into certification programs. I told the receptionist. She handed me a brochure. I sat in a plastic chair and flipped through it. For years, I had wanted to get my project management professional certification, the PMP. It would bump my salary potential up significantly. It would open doors to industries outside of insurance and basic logistics. I had never done it. It cost $500 for the course and the exam. $500 was exactly the amount I usually had to give my parents when my father's truck needed a new transmission, or when Caleb needed a suit for an interview. I had always told myself, next year, when things settle down, things never settled down. I looked at the course schedule. There was a prep class starting next Tuesday, evenings. I walked up to the counter. I want to register for the PMP prep course. I said, that will be $550 with the materials fee. The receptionist said. I pulled out my debit card, the new one, the one connected to the account only I could touch. I paid for it. As I signed the receipt, my hand was steady. It wasn't just a class. It was a declaration. I was investing in my own future stock. 2 days later, I went to therapy. I had found Dr. Evans online. She accepted my insurance, which I still had. Thankfully, as I was technically on a leave of absence from my old job before I officially resigned, and the temp agency offered a catastrophic plan. She operated out of a converted carriage house on the edge of the historic district. The room was warm. There were books on the shelves that looked red. Not just displayed. I sat on a beige sofa that had a slight dip in the middle. I don't know where to start. I said, start with why you are here. Doctor, Evans said. She was a woman in her 50s with short gray hair and glasses that hung around her neck on a beaded chain. I left my family. I said, I bought a one-way ticket, and I left. And how does that feel? It feels like I stopped holding up a ceiling that was trying to crush me. I said, but I am afraid. Afraid of what? Afraid that I am wrong. Afraid that I am the selfish one. They tell me I am selfish. My brother told me I was embarrassing him. My father emailed me saying I am spiraling. My mother is telling the neighbors I am in a mental facility. Doctor? Evans didn't gasp. She didn't look shocked. She just nodded, scribbling something on a yellow legal pad. Violet, she said. Her voice measured. Do you know what a transactional relationship is? I shook my head. It is a relationship where affection, safety, and belonging are treated as commodities to be purchased, she explained. You give something money, labor, silence, compliance, and in exchange, you receive a temporary reprieve from rejection. You don't get love. You get tenure. You get to stay in the tribe for another week. I stared at her. The words hit me like a physical blow. You don't get love. You get tenure. I thought if I was good enough, I whispered, if I was reliable enough, if I saved them enough times, I thought eventually, I would earn it. You can't earn what isn't on the shelves. Violet, doctor, Evans said gently, if you go to a hardware store and ask for milk, it doesn't matter how politely you ask or how much money you put on the counter, they don't have milk. I started to cry then, not the hysterical sobbing my mother accused me of, but a quiet, steady leaking of grief. I am not the hardware store, I said, wiping my eyes. I am the bank, and the maid, doctor, Evans added, and the scapegoat, and the PR firm. We talked for an hour. It wasn't magic. It didn't fix the hole in my chest. But it gave me a map. I left the session feeling exhausted, but grounded. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't spiraling. I was just a customer who had finally stopped shopping at a store that had nothing for me. The following Tuesday, I came home from work to find a packet of mail on the small table in my motel room. I had set up mail forwarding the day I moved into the motel. It had taken a few weeks to kick in. Most of it was junk flyers for pizza places in my old town, a catalog for a clothing store I never shopped at, but at the bottom of the pile was a thick, white envelope. It had a window on the front. Through the plastic, I could see my name, Violet M. Russell. The return address was for a company called Eagleton Capital Solutions. I didn't recognize the name. It sounded official, predatory. I picked it up. The paper felt heavy, expensive. I sat on the edge of the bed and tore open the flap. I pulled out 3 sheets of paper, stapled together. Notice of default and acceleration. The words swam before my eyes. Dear Ms. Russell, this letter serves as formal notice that your business line of credit, account 8990-221, is in default. You have failed to make the required minimum payments for the months of December, January, and February. As per the terms of the agreement signed on November 15th, the entire balance is now due and payable immediately. Total amount due: $42,580. $42,580. I stopped breathing. $42,000. I read the letter again. Business line of credit. I didn't have a business. I didn't have a line of credit. My eyes scanned down the page to the bottom. There was a photocopy of a signature block included as a reference. Borrower, Violet M. Russell Co. Borrower, Elaine Russell. Business name, Russell. Event rentals. I looked at the signature. It was my name. It looked like my handwriting, but it was slightly off, too smooth, too uniform. It was a digital signature. I remembered, suddenly, a moment 3 years ago. My parents had asked me to help them set up a DocuSign account for a lease renewal on their house. I had created the account. I had set up their signatures, and because I was on the lease as a guarantor, I had set up mine too. They had my digital signature on file. They had opened a business line of credit in my name, Russell Event Rentals, a fake company, a shell. November 15th, 3 months ago, while I was studying for finals, while I was working overtime to save for the graduation dinner, while I was buying them Christmas presents, they had gone online, used my credentials, and taken out a $42,000 loan, and they had spent it, and now they weren't paying it. I dropped the letter on the bed. It slid across the floral comforter. My hands started to shake, not the little tremors I had felt before. This was a violent, uncontrollable shaking. My teeth chattered. This wasn't just theft. This wasn't just $45 a month for pizza. This was fraud. This was a felony. This was prison time. I stood up, my knees buckling slightly. I walked to the window and looked out at the parking lot. The rain was coming down harder now, hammering against the glass. I thought about the email from my father. We are trying to protect you from making mistakes. I thought about the rumors of the mental facility. It all clicked into place. The terrified logic of it. If I was crazy, if I was institutionalized, if I was spiraling, then I couldn't be trusted when I said I didn't sign this loan. If I was unstable, maybe I did open a business and forget about it. Maybe I did spend the money on a manic episode. They weren't just protecting their social standing. They were building an alibi. I looked back at the letter. $42,000. They had mortgaged my future to pay for their present. I reached for my phone. I didn't call my parents. I didn't call Caleb. I opened the contact for Marcus, the financial counselor. Then I closed it. Marcus couldn't help with this. I opened a search browser and typed in 2 words, forensic accountant. Then I typed 2 more, fraud attorney. I wasn't Violet the daughter anymore. I was the prosecution. The document from Eagleton Capital Solutions lay on the cheap laminate table of my motel room like a radioactive isotope. I didn't want to touch it, but I couldn't look away. $42,580. It was a number that didn't just represent debt. It represented a systematic dismantling of my identity. I spent the next 4 hours not crying, not pacing, but sitting in a rigid, terrifying silence, peeling back the layers of the fraud my parents had constructed. I started with the company name Russell Event Rentals. A quick search on the Secretary of State's website showed it was a registered limited liability company. It had been formed 3 years ago. The registered agent was my father, Richard Russell. The business address was their house, the house I had grown up in, the house where I had mowed the lawn and painted the shutters. I dug deeper. I found a rudimentary website. It was a template site, filled with stock photos of white folding chairs and chocolate fountains. The About Us section was a masterpiece of fiction. Russell Event Rentals is a family-owned legacy, committed to making your special day perfect. Founded by Richard and Elaine Russell, and managed by their daughter, Violet, an operations specialist. There was a photo of me. It was cropped from my cousin's wedding 4 years ago. I was smiling, holding a bouquet of hydrangeas underneath my face. The caption read, Violet Russell, Chief Financial Officer. I felt the bile rise in my throat. I wasn't just a co-signer. I was the face of the operation. I went back to the loan documents. I needed to understand how they had signed my name. The letter mentioned a digital authorization. I logged into my old email accounts, the ones I checked daily, but found nothing. Then, a memory surfaced. 7 years ago. When I was applying for grad school the first time, the time I didn't go because Caleb totaled his truck, my father had insisted on helping me organize my applications. He had set up a dedicated email address so we wouldn't miss any acceptance letters. Violet, R, applications gmail.com. I hadn't logged into it in half a decade. I tried the password I used back then. It didn't work. I tried my mother's birthday. It didn't work. I tried the name of the family dog. Buster, 123. The inbox loaded. It was full. Thousands of unread messages. But they weren't from universities. They were from lenders, credit card offers, bank statements, and there, dated November 15th, was the DocuSign envelope from Eagleton Capital Solutions. Please sign business line of credit agreement. I opened the audit trail. It showed the document was viewed and signed at 8:45 in the evening. The IP address matched the one for my parents' home internet, the same IP address I had used 1,000 times to submit my own homework. They hadn't hacked me. They had simply walked through a door I had left unlocked because I thought the people on the other side loved me. I printed everything. The screenshots of the website, the Secretary of State filing, the DocuSign audit trail, the loan default notice. I stacked the papers into a neat pile. This was my evidence. Then, I opened a new document on my laptop. I didn't write Dear Mom and Dad. That felt too intimate for a crime scene. I wrote to Richard and Elaine Russell. I am in receipt of a notice of default from Eagleton Capital Solutions regarding a business line of credit for $42,580 in the name of Russell Event Rentals. I did not authorize this loan. I do not own this business. I did not sign these documents. The audit trail indicates my digital signature was accessed using an email account you created and control. This constitutes identity theft and wire fraud. I am giving you 24 hours to provide proof that you have contacted the lender to assume full liability for this debt. If I do not receive this proof, I will be filing a police report and submitting a fraud affidavit to the lender, which will trigger a criminal investigation. Violet Russell. I read it over. It was cold. It was factual. It was the only language left that they might understand. I hit send. The reaction was immediate and volcanic. 10 minutes later, my phone lit up. Mom. I let it go to voicemail. Then Dad. Voicemail. Then Caleb. Voicemail. Then the email started. Violet. Pick up the phone right now. You are misunderstanding everything. How dare you threaten us with the police? We are your parents. It's just a business loan. Violet, we were going to pay it back. The business had a slow quarter. Don't blow this out of proportion. I sat and watched the notifications roll in like a tide of sewage. I didn't reply. I waited. An hour later, a long email arrived from my mother. The subject line was, "Please read," from the heart. Violet, I don't know who you have become in that city, but this isn't you. You are hurting us. You are trying to destroy us. Yes, we used your name, but we did it for the family. We did it for you, too. That business was supposed to be your legacy. We built it so we would all have something. We put your picture on the website because we are proud of you. We tell everyone how smart you are, how good you are with money. You are our success story. People look at us and they ask how we raised such a capable daughter. We tell them it's because we are a team. We support each other. Using your credit score wasn't stealing. It was leveraging our family's assets. You have good credit because we raised you to be responsible. That credit belongs to the family name. If you report this, you will send your father to jail. Is that what you want? To see your father in handcuffs because of a paperwork issue? Please, Violet, just sign a forbearance extension. That is all we need. Just 6 months. We will pay it back. Don't be the villain in your own family story. I stared at the screen. That credit belongs to the family name. The twist in logic was so profound, it was almost admirable. They had taken my obedience, my fear of failure, and my desperate need to be good, and they had monetized it. My credit score wasn't a reflection of my hard work. In their eyes, it was a dividend they were entitled to harvest. They paraded me around as a trophy. Look at our smart daughter while simultaneously cannibalizing the very stability they bragged about. I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel the old tug to fix it. I felt a sudden, sharp clarity. They weren't asking for help. They were asking for an accomplice. I closed the laptop. I didn't respond. The 24-hour clock was ticking. The next day at work, the chaos of my personal life was mirrored by chaos in the office. We were 3 days out from the Spring Maritime Festival, the biggest event of the quarter. It was a massive logistical beast involving 300 vendors, 2 music stages, and a VIP seafood tasting tent that cost $500 a ticket. At 10 in the morning, the lead coordinator for the VIP tent rushed into the office, looking pale. The tent company canceled. She gasped. They double-booked with a wedding in Seattle. They are pulling our reservation. The office went silent. No tent meant no VIP tasting. No VIP tasting meant refunding $50,000 in ticket sales and humiliating the mayor, who was hosting the event. Panic erupted. People were shouting, grabbing phones, blaming each other. Sarah was frantically typing, trying to find another vendor. I sat at my desk. I looked at the spreadsheet, my brain, honed by 30 years of managing my parents' manufactured crises, shifted into a familiar gear. Panic was a luxury I had never been allowed. When my father forgot to pay the electric bill, I didn't scream. I found the flashlights and called the power company to negotiate a payment plan. I stood up. Stop, I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the noise. Everyone looked at me. Calling other vendors won't work. I said calmly, "It is spring in the Pacific Northwest. Every tent company is booked." "So we are screwed?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. "No," I said. "We changed the venue. The Maritime Museum is right next to the pier. They have a glass-enclosed pavilion that faces the water. It is empty on Tuesdays. If we move the tasting there, we don't need a tent. We save $3,000 on rental fees, which we can use to pay the museum for a rush permit. But the museum is strict about catering." Someone objected. I already checked their approved vendor list. I said, "Our caterer, Salty's, is on it. I saw the list when I was filing the noise permits last week." The room was quiet for 3 seconds. Then, the boss, Mr. Henderson, a man with a thick beard and a permanent frown, pointed a finger at me. "Call the museum," he said. "Right now." I called the museum. I negotiated the rate. I called the caterer to redirect the delivery trucks. I called the print shop to rush order new signage directing guests to the pavilion. By 2 o'clock, the crisis was over. The event was saved. Mr. Henderson called me into his office at 4. He sat behind his desk, looking at me with a new expression. It was respect. "Violet," he said, "that was impressive. Most people freeze when the plan breaks. You didn't even blink." I just looked for the next logical step. I said. He leaned back in his chair. "Listen, Linda isn't coming back. She decided to stay home with the baby. I was going to post the job listing for the office manager position next week, but I don't want to interview strangers. I want you." I froze. "It comes with a salary bump." Henderson continued. "Benefits, paid time off, and a title change to Director of Operations. You are overqualified for temp work. I can see that. I want you on the team. Permanently. Permanently." The word hung in the air. My instinct was to run. "I can't commit." The voice in my head whispered, "I am a fugitive. My parents are criminals. I have $42,000 of fraudulent debt hanging over my head. I can't put down roots here. It isn't safe. I looked at Henderson. He was offering me a future, a real one, based on my merit, not my bloodline. If I said no, I was letting them win. I was letting the fear they instilled in me dictate my life 3,000 miles away. I took a deep breath. I would like that. I said, "Thank you." "Good," Henderson said, extending his hand. "Welcome to the company, Violet." I shook his hand. It felt solid, real. I walked out of his office feeling like I was walking on air. For the first time, I had chosen myself. I had chosen a life that was mine. The high lasted exactly 18 hours. The next morning, I arrived at the office early, ready to start organizing the new filing system I had pitched. I had a coffee in hand. I felt capable. I walked in, and the atmosphere was different. The office was quiet. Too quiet. Sarah wouldn't meet my eye. The receptionist looked down at her desk. "Mr. Henderson opened his door. "Violet," he said. His voice was stiff. "Can you come in here? Please close the door." I walked in. My stomach dropped. The familiar knot of dread, the "what did they do now" sensation tightened in my gut. Henderson was sitting at his computer. He looked uncomfortable. "I received an email this morning," he said, "to the general inquiry inbox. It was concerning." He turned the monitor so I could see. The subject line was urgent, safety concern. Regarding employee Violet Russell. It was from crusaders_for_family_values gmail.com. An anonymous address. To the management of coastal events. We are writing to inform you of a serious safety risk regarding your temporary employee. Violet Russell. While we wish her well, it is important you know that Ms. Russell fled her home state while under psychiatric care for a severe manic episode involving pathological lying and financial instability. She has a history of erratic behavior and is currently hiding from family members who are trying to help her. She may be using your company to gain access to financial data or vendor accounts. We strongly urge you to audit any accounts she has access to. She is not stable. A concerned party. I read the words, pathological lying, financial instability, audit any accounts. They were trying to get me fired. They were trying to cut off my income. If I lost this job, I would burn through my savings. I would be destitute. I would have to come home. It was a siege tactic. Starve the enemy out. I looked up at Henderson. His face was unreadable. "Is this true?" he asked. The old Violet would have panicked. She would have cried. She would have tried to over-explain, to beg, to make excuses for them while defending herself. But I wasn't the old Violet. I was the chief financial officer of a fake company. I was the woman who had saved the Maritime Festival. I sat down in the chair opposite him. I didn't slouch. I looked him directly in the eye. "No, Mr. Henderson," I said, "it is not true, but I can tell you exactly who sent it." He waited. "My parents sent it," I said, "or my brother." "Your parents?" he asked, frowning. "Why would your parents try to get you fired?" "Because I discovered 3 days ago that they fraudulently opened a $42,000 line of credit in my name and defaulted on it," I said. My voice was steady, factual. I confronted them and told them I would be filing a police report if they didn't assume liability. "This email is retaliation. They are trying to destroy my credibility and cut off my resources, so I am forced to return home and help them cover up a felony." Henderson stared at me. His mouth opened slightly. "I know how that sounds." I continued. "It sounds like a soap opera. But I have the loan documents, the IP address logs, and the threatening emails they sent me yesterday promising to ruin me if I didn't comply. I can show them to you right now." I didn't offer to show him my medical records. I didn't offer to show him a note from a doctor. I offered him data. I reached into my bag and pulled out the folder, the one I had prepared for the police. I slid it across the desk. "Here is the default notice," I said. "Here is the digital signature audit trail matching their home address. And here is the email from my mother admitting they used my name for family assets." Henderson picked up the papers. He read them. He read the email from my mother. He put the papers down. He rubbed his temples. "Jesus," he said softly. I understand if you want to let me go. I said, I know this is drama you didn't sign up for, but I assure you, I am not manic. I am not a thief, and my work speaks for itself. Henderson looked at the email on the screen again, the anonymous. Venomous smear. Then he looked at me. He saw the navy blazer, the tight bun, the hands folded calmly in my lap. He deleted the email. He didn't just archive it. He hit delete. You saved the mayor's event yesterday. He said, you saved me $50,000. That is the reality I care about. He pushed the folder back to me. Keep your evidence, Violet. You might need it. As far as I am concerned, this email never arrived. But I would suggest you lock down your social media if you haven't already. I don't have social media. I said, good. He said, get back to work. I walked out of the office. My legs were shaking, but only a little. They had fired their biggest weapon. They had tried to nuke my livelihood, and I was still standing. That evening, I didn't go home to the motel. I went to a law office I had found online, Vance Associates. They specialized in identity theft and family law. Ms. Vance was a sharp-featured woman with silver hair and a suit that looked like it cost more than my entire wardrobe. She listened to me for 40 minutes without interrupting. She looked at the documents. She looked at the email chain. You have them dead to rights. She said, this is wire fraud, identity theft, and arguably extortion. If you go to the police, your parents will be arrested. It is a felony. I looked at the certificates on her wall. I don't want to destroy them. I said, it was the first time I had admitted it out loud. Despite everything, the graduation, the theft, the lies, the attempt to get me fired there was still a part of me that couldn't stomach the image of my mother in a prison cell. It was a weakness. Maybe, or maybe it was just humanity. I just want to be free. I said, I want the dead off my name. I want them to leave me alone. I want to never hear the words, family emergency again. Ms. Vance nodded. She tapped a pen against her desk. Okay, she said. We can try a civil approach first. We send a demand letter, a formal one, on my letterhead. We demand they refinance the loan into their own names immediately. We demand they sign a contractual agreement never to use your identity again. And we attach a draft of the criminal complaint we will file if they don't comply within 7 days. It is called the Sword of Damocles strategy. She added, we hang the threat over their heads. Usually, fear of prison is a great motivator for refinancing. Do it, I said. She started organizing the papers. She flipped through the loan application audit trail again. Wait a minute, she said. She squinted at the paper. What I asked. I am looking at the dates here, she said. You said they skipped your graduation for a Super Bowl party. Yes, I said. February 11th, Ms. Vance turned the paper around. Look at this, she said. This is the timeline for the loan disbursement. They applied for the line of credit in November. But it was conditional. The bank required a guarantor verification call or a secondary signature on a specific modification document to release the funds. She pointed to a timestamp. The final authorization, the one that actually released the $42,000 into their account, was signed on February 4th. I did the math. February 4th. That was exactly 1 week before the Super Bowl. And here's the kicker. Ms. Vance said. The bank's notes say they requested an in-person verification, but the borrowers, your parents, convinced the loan officer to accept a digital verification because the co-signer, you, was unavailable and preparing for a major family event. I stared at her. They used my graduation as the excuse. They told the bank I couldn't come to the phone because I was graduating. And then, once the money was released on February 4th, they had the cash. They had $42,000 in their account the week of the Super Bowl, the party, the lavish spread, the New Jerseys, the networking event for Caleb. They didn't just skip my graduation because it was inconvenient. They skipped it because they were celebrating the heist. They were spending the money they had just stolen from my future to throw the party that kept me invisible. The graduation wasn't just a scheduling conflict, it was the cover story. I felt a coldness settle into my bones that was deeper than anything I had felt before. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't anger. It was the absolute. Final death of hope. There was no misunderstanding. There was no, we did it for the family. It was a transaction, pure and simple. I was the collateral. The party was the payoff. Draft the letter, Ms. Vance, I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, like it was coming from a great distance. And Ms. Vance. Yes. Don't give them 7 days. Give them 48 hours. I walked out of the law office into the night. The rain had stopped. The air was crisp and cold. I looked up at the moon. I was done investigating. I was done reacting. It was time to close the account, permanently. The flight back to my hometown felt less like a return and more like a deployment. I sat in seat 12F, watching the familiar landscape assemble itself below me, the sprawling grid of suburbs, the brown snake of the river, the patches of dense green forest. 6 weeks ago, I had looked down at this view with a heart full of guilt and a stomach full of panic. Now, I looked at it with the cold, flat gaze of an auditor arriving to liquidate a bankrupt company. I didn't tell them I was coming. I landed at 10 in the morning. I rented a gray sedan from a kiosk, declining the insurance because my new credit card covered it, a card that only I knew existed. I drove past the exit for my parents' neighborhood, past the turnoff for my old apartment, and went straight to a chain hotel near the interstate. It was a sterile, beige building that smelled of chlorine and carpet cleaner. It was perfect. I checked in, unpacked my blazer, and set up my command center on the small desk. My laptop, the folder of evidence, the demand letter Ms. Vance had drafted. I took a shower, washing off the travel grit. I dressed in the same clothes I wore to work in Port Haven, the navy blazer, a crisp white blouse, dark trousers. I wasn't Violet the daughter today. I was Violet the plaintiff. At noon, I sent a text to a group thread containing my mother, father, and Caleb. I am in town. Meet me at O'Malley's Diner on 4th Street at 2:00 p.m. Do not come to my hotel. Do not go to my old apartment. If you are not there, I will drive directly to the police station. I turned off the phone before they could reply. O'Malley's was neutral ground. It was a place where we used to go for Sunday breakfast when I was a child, back before the debt started piling up, back when we could pretend we were a normal American family. It had red vinyl booths and smelled of bacon grease and coffee. I arrived 15 minutes early. I chose a booth near the door, ensuring I had a clear exit. I ordered a black coffee. At 1:55, my parents' car pulled into the lot. It was a newer SUV, one I knew they couldn't afford, leased on terms that probably involved a balloon payment that would explode in 3 years. They walked in. My mother looked thinner. Her hair, usually sprayed into a perfect helmet of blonde, looked slightly deflated. My father walked with a heavy, shuffling gait, his shoulders hunched. They looked like victims. It was a look they had perfected over decades. They saw me. My mother's face crumpled into a mask of relieved anguish. She rushed forward, arms open. Violet, oh, my God. Violet. She tried to hug me. I didn't stand up. I didn't open my arms. I sat perfectly still, my hands folded on the table next to the thick manila folder. Sit down. Mom, I said. The rejection hit her like a physical slap. She stopped, hovering over the table, her eyes wide and watery. She looked at my father. He looked at me, his jaw working silently. Violet, honey, my father said, his voice rough. You don't have to be like this. Everyone is staring. Sit down, I repeated. They slid into the booth opposite me. The vinyl squeaked. My mother reached for my hand across the table. I pulled it back, placing it in my lap. You look tired, my mother said, her voice trembling. You look so pale. Are you eating? We have been so worried. The things we heard. Stop, I said. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The word was a stone dropped into a pond. We are not here to talk about my health, I said. We are here to talk about the $42,580 you stole from me. My father stiffened. He looked around the diner. checking to see if the waitress was listening. "Keep your voice down," he hissed. "It wasn't stealing. We have been over this. It was a leverage of assets, a business decision." I opened the folder. I pulled out the DocuSign audit trail. I slid it across the table. "This is a felony," I said. "Wire fraud, identity theft. You used an email address you created to impersonate me. You signed a federal lending document. That isn't a business decision." "Dad, that is 5 to 10 years in federal prison." My mother burst into tears. It was a sudden, jagged sound. "How can you sit there and talk about sending your father to prison?" she sobbed. "After everything we did for you, we gave you life. We raised you, we are your family." I watched her cry. A few months ago, this would have broken me. I would have been apologizing, handing her napkins, promising to fix it. Now, I just watched the performance. I noticed that she was crying loud enough for the couple in the next booth to hear. But she was checking her phone under the table. "You didn't do this for the family." I said, "You did it for a party." I pulled out the second document, the timeline Ms. Vance had found. "You signed the final release on February 4th. I said, 1 week before the Super Bowl. You told the bank I was unavailable because I was graduating. You used my graduation, the event you couldn't be bothered to attend, as the excuse to steal the money you used to throw the party you went to instead." My father's face turned a mottled red. "It wasn't for the party," he snapped. "That is just timing. We needed that line of credit to bridge the gap." "The business." "There is no business," I said. "Russell Event Rentals is a shell. It has no inventory. It has no clients. It is a website and a bank account you use to launder debt." "Caleb is late," I added, checking my watch. "He is coming." My mother sniffed, wiping her eyes with a paper napkin. "He had to leave work early. He is risking his job to be here for you." "For me?" I asked. "Or for the bank account?" Just then, the door opened. Caleb walked in. He looked polished. He was wearing a suit that fit him too well, a watch that was too big for his wrist, and carrying a leather portfolio. He looked like the successful young professional my parents told everyone he was. He slid into the booth next to my father, squeezing him against the wall. He didn't look at me. He looked at the folder on the table. "So," he said, "we are doing this." "Hello, Caleb," I said. "Look, Vi," he said, leaning forward. His voice was low, urgent. "You need to drop this. Seriously, you are blowing this way out of proportion. Mom and Dad are a mess. They defaulted on a loan in my name." "Caleb," I said. "So they were going to pay it. They just had a cash flow issue. It happens in business all the time. But you running away, disappearing, that is what caused the real problem." I waited. I knew if I stayed silent, he would fill the space. "You know Henderson asked about you again," Caleb continued, his agitation growing. "The Super Bowl party was a huge win for me. I got FaceTime with the regional VP. They loved the family vibe. Mom and Dad were great. We told them you were moving to the city to open a branch office for the family business." I blinked. "To open a branch office?" I asked. "Yeah," Caleb said. It sounded good. "My sister is expanding our operations. It made us look successful, growth-oriented, and then you vanish. And then people start asking questions. Where is Violet? Why is the phone disconnected? You made us look like liars. Vi." I stared at him. The sheer, unadulterated narcissism was breathtaking. "I didn't make you look like liars. Caleb," I said, "you lied. You used my life as a prop in a story you were telling to sell used cars. It is not just cars. It is a career. It is our reputation." He slammed his hand on the table. The silverware rattled. And then, the real truth slipped out. "We needed you here," Caleb hissed. "We didn't just need the credit line. We needed you to sign the refinancing paperwork the Monday after the Super Bowl." I went very still. "What refinancing paperwork?" I asked. My father kicked Caleb under the table. I saw the jerk of his leg. "Shut up, Caleb," my father muttered. "No, tell me," I said, locking eyes with my brother. "What paperwork?" Caleb looked at our father, then back at me. He looked defiant, like a child who had been caught but felt justified. The house. Caleb said they were refinancing the house, taking out the equity to pay off the credit cards and the car loans. But because Dad's credit score is shot, the bank wouldn't do it unless you were on the deed and the mortgage. I felt the blood drain from my face. You were going to put me on the mortgage, I whispered. We were going to put you on the deed, my mother interjected, trying to spin it. You would have owned the house. It was an inheritance. You were going to anchor me to $300,000 of debt. I said, you were going to use my income and my credit score to secure a loan you couldn't pay, and when you defaulted, the bank would have come for me. They would have garnished my wages. They would have taken everything. That is why you wanted me to stay. I realized aloud. The one-way ticket didn't just embarrass you. It saved me. If I had been here that Monday, you would have signed it. My father said. His voice was sullen. You always signed it. You are the dutiful daughter. I looked at the three of them. My mother, the emotional architect, my father, the silent enforcer. Caleb, the golden child who needed my gold to shine. They were a closed loop of consumption, and I was the fuel. I am not the dutiful daughter anymore. I said, I am the glitch in your system. I opened the folder again. I took out the demand letter Ms. Vance had prepared. Here are the terms. I said, I didn't ask. I didn't negotiate. I read, 1. You have 48 hours to refinance the Eagleton Capital loan into your own names. I don't care how you do it. Sell the SUV, sell the big TV, borrow it from a shark. I don't care. Get my name off it. 2. You will sign a document, prepared by my lawyer, admitting that the Russell Event Rentals line of credit was opened without my consent. This document will be held in escrow if you ever use my name, social security number, or image again for any financial purpose. That document goes to the district attorney. 3. You will never contact my employer again if you send another email, anonymous or otherwise, trying to sabotage my job. I will file a restraining order and a defamation suit. I pushed the paper across the table. My mother looked at the paper as if it were a death warrant. Violet, we can't refinance $40,000 in 2 days, she wailed. Our credit is ruined. That sounds like a you problem. Mom, I said, you found a way to steal it in a week. Find a way to pay it back. Violet, please, my father said. He switched tactics. He slumped his shoulders, making himself look old and frail. Remember when you were 6 and you wanted those ballet lessons? We didn't have the money. I worked overtime for 3 months to pay for those slippers. We sacrificed everything for you. We gave you a happy childhood. Doesn't that count for anything? I looked at him. I remembered the ballet lessons. I also remembered that I had to quit 2 years later because he gambled the tuition money on a sure thing stock tip that crashed. I remembered the braces. I also remembered that I paid for my own retainer replacements when I was 16 because money was tight. Every gift you gave me came with an invoice. Dad, I said, I have been paying you back since I was 22. I have paid off your credit cards. I have co-signed your cars. I have been your retirement plan and your emergency fund. The debt is paid. We are even. I am not helping you just this once, I said, because just this once has been the theme song of the last decade. Violet, Caleb said. He sounded scared now. If you do this, if you file that report, it will ruin us. Henderson will fire me if he finds out my family is involved in fraud. Dad will lose his standing in the community. You are blowing up the family. I stood up. I didn't blow up the family. Caleb, I said, I just stopped defusing the bomb you planted. I placed a $10 bill on the table for my coffee. You have 48 hours, I said. My lawyer is expecting proof of refinance by Friday at noon. If not, the affidavit goes to the police on Friday at 1. I walked out of the diner. I didn't look back. I knew what I would see if I did 3 people huddled together, not comforting each other, but calculating their next move. I drove back to the hotel. My hands were steady on the wheel. I thought I would feel triumphant. I thought standing up to them would feel like a movie moment, with swelling music and a sense of victory. Instead, I just felt exhausted. It was a deep, bone-weary tiredness. It was the exhaustion of someone who has just amputated a gangrenous limb. You are glad the poison is gone, but you are still missing a part of yourself. I went to my room, I locked the door and engaged the deadbolt. I sat on the bed and stared at the beige wall. My phone buzzed. I picked it up, expecting a barrage of hate texts. It wasn't a text. It was an email notification. You have been invited. The Port Haven Surrounding Areas Community Gala. I frowned. Why was I getting an invite to a local gala here? In my hometown, I opened the email. It wasn't sent to my personal email. It was forwarded from my old work email, the one at the insurance agency I had left. The automated forwarding system I had set up years ago was still active. The invitation was digital. It was for a high-end fundraiser taking place tomorrow night at the convention center. Tickets were $200 a plate, honoring local families of distinction. I scrolled down the guest list, which was visible on the Evite page. Mr. and Mrs. Richard Russell, Mr. Caleb Russell, Miss Violet Russell. Returning from expansion operations. My breath hitched. They were going. They had bought tickets, and they had put my name on the list. Violet Russell, returning from expansion operations. They weren't scrambling to refinance. They weren't selling the SUV. They weren't panicked about the 48-hour deadline. They were doubling down. They were going to this gala, a room full of the town's wealthiest and most influential people, including Caleb's boss, and they were going to pretend everything was fine. They were going to smile and drink champagne and tell everyone that their daughter was back in town to expand the family empire. They were betting that I wouldn't show up. They were betting that Violet, the dutiful daughter, Violet the quiet one, Violet the girl who hated conflict, would stay in her hotel room and let them spin the narrative. They were betting that I would be too ashamed to cause a scene. They thought the threat of the police report was a bluff. They thought they could charm their way through one more night, keep the image polished, and then guilt me into silence over the weekend. I looked at the date. Tomorrow, 7 p.m. I looked at the location, the convention center. I looked at my suitcase. I had my navy blazer. I had my sensible trousers. I didn't have a gala dress, but I had a credit card with a $20,000 limit that was solely in my name. And I had a fierce, cold anger that was finally burning hot enough to fuel an engine. I wasn't going to hide in the hotel. I picked up my phone and called Ms. Vance. Ms. Vance, I said when she answered. Violet. Did the meeting go well? No, I said. They are not going to refinance. They are going to a party. A party. Yes, a gala. Tomorrow night. They have listed me as a guest. They are telling people I am back to work for their fake company. There was a silence on the line. Then, Ms. Vance sighed. So, we file on Friday, she asked. We file on Friday, I said. But I need you to do something for me before then. What I need you to pull the full financial records for Russell Event Rentals. Specifically, I need to know where the money went, the $42,000. I need an itemized list of every vendor they paid. I can get that from the bank records attached to the default notice. She said, Why? Because I am going to the gala. I said, Violet, Ms. Vance warned, that is a bad idea. Confrontations in public usually backfire. It makes you look unstable. It plays right into their narrative. I am not going to confront them. I said, I am just going to attend. I am on the guest list. After all, Violet. I need the records. Ms. Vance, please, email them to me by noon tomorrow. I hung up. I walked to the window and looked out at the parking lot. The sun was setting, casting long, bruised shadows across the asphalt. They wanted a show. They wanted the polished family brand. They wanted everyone to see the Russells as a success story. Fine, I would give them a show. I would give them the most realistic performance of my life. I grabbed my keys. I needed to find a dress shop. And not just any dress shop. I needed something that said, I am not a resource. I needed something that looked like armor. The relocation was over. Violet Russell was home. I bought a dress that cost $300. It was not a ball gown. It was a sheath of black silk that fell to my mid-calf. tailored to within an inch of its life. It had long sleeves and a high neck. It was severe, elegant, and completely unapproachable. I pulled my hair back into a low, smooth knot and applied lipstick the color of dried blood. I looked in the hotel mirror. I did not look like a daughter coming home. I looked like a verdict. The convention center was lit up like a cruise ship against the dark sky of my hometown. Valets were running back and forth, parking Lexuses and Mercedes. I drove my rental sedan past them and parked in the self-parking lot across the street. I walked the 200 yards to the entrance in the cold night air, my heels clicking a steady rhythm on the pavement. Inside, the air smelled of expensive perfume and catered roast beef. The lobby was crowded with the town's elite local politicians, business owners, the people my brother was desperate to impress. I checked my coat at the cloakroom. I kept my clutch, which held my phone and the folded printouts Miss Vance had emailed me that morning. I walked to the check-in table. 2 young women with clipboards looked up, their smiles bright and practiced. Name one asked. Violet Russell, I said. Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second. She scanned the list. Oh yes, the Russell party. You are at table 12, right near the front. Your parents are already inside during the cocktail hour. Thank you, I said. I didn't go to the cocktail hour. I stood in the shadow of a large potted palm near the ballroom doors and watched. I saw them. They were holding court near the bar. My mother was wearing a navy blue gown with sequins that caught the light, holding a flute of champagne. My father was in a tuxedo that looked rented but serviceable, laughing loudly at something a man in a gray suit said. Caleb was there, too, gesturing animatedly, his face flushed with the high of social climbing. They looked happy. That was the thing that stopped my breath in my throat. They didn't look like people who were 48 hours away from a felony indictment. They didn't look like people who had stolen $42,000 from their daughter. They looked relieved. They thought they had won. They thought my silence in the diner was submission. They thought I was back in the hotel room, crying, packing my bags to return to the fold. I took a deep breath. I walked into the room. The transition was subtle at first. A few people turned to look at the woman in the black dress walking with purpose. Then, a ripple of recognition. Violet. Someone whispered, "Is that Violet Russell?" I didn't stop to chat. I walked straight toward them. Caleb saw me first. His smile froze. The glass in his hand tilted dangerously. He tapped my father on the shoulder. My father turned. My mother turned. The color drained from my mother's face so fast I thought she might faint. It was instantaneous, the shift from social butterfly to terrified animal. "Violet," she hissed as I got close. "What are you doing here?" "I am attending the gala," I said. My voice was calm, pleasant. I was invited. See, I held up the digital invite on my phone. "You need to leave," Caleb whispered, stepping between me and the man in the gray suit. "Seriously. Vi, you are going to make a scene. Go back to the hotel. We will talk later. I am not here to make a scene." "Caleb," I said, "I am here to have dinner." I stepped around him. "Oh, hello." The man in the gray suit turned to me. He had a kind, flushed face. "You must be the sister," he said, extending a hand. "Gerald Henderson. No relation to your boss. I assume Caleb has told me so much about you. You are running the West Coast expansion, right? That is impressive work." I took his hand. It was warm and dry. I looked at Caleb. He was staring at me with a look of pure panic. He was silently begging me to play along. Just this once. Just nod. Just smile. "Actually, Mr. Henderson," I said, smiling politely, "I am not running an expansion. I work for a separate company in Port Haven. I am an operations director." The man looked confused. "Oh," I thought. "Well, Caleb said it was a family branch." My father stepped in, his laugh booming and fake. "Oh, you know how it is," he said, clapping Mr. Henderson on the back. "It is all family money, all family business in the end. Right, Violet likes to be independent. She is very modest." He gripped my arm. His fingers dug into my bicep. "Come on, honey," he said through gritted teeth. "Let's go find our seats. The program is starting." He tried to steer me away. I didn't move. I stood planted in my heels. Let go of my arm. "Dad," I said. It wasn't a whisper. It was spoken at a normal conversational volume. In the sudden lull of the room, it carried, my father let go as if I were burning hot. We walked to table 12 in silence. It was a round table with a centerpiece of white roses. I sat in the chair labeled Violet Russell. My parents sat opposite me. Caleb sat next to me, vibrating with tension. The lights dimmed. The program began. I sat with my hands folded in my lap. I didn't eat the salad. I didn't drink the wine. I just watched them. They were sweating. My mother kept touching her necklace. A nervous tick. My father was drinking his scotch too fast. They were terrified. Not because they loved me and were worried about my soul, but because they were in a room full of people they had lied to. And the living proof of their deception was sitting across from them in a black silk dress. The executive director of the charity took the stage. He was a tall man with silver hair. "Tonight," he said into the microphone, his voice booming over the speakers, "tonight is about community. It is about the families who make this town what it is, the families who give back, even when times are tough." Applause filled the room. "We have a special recognition tonight," he continued. "We want to honor our families of distinction. These are local pillars who have gone above and beyond to sponsor our youth programs this year." I saw my mother sit up straighter. She smoothed her hair. She looked at Caleb with a gleam of anticipation. "Our first honorees," the director said, "are a wonderful example of entrepreneurial spirit and generosity. Please welcome to the stage Richard and Elaine Russell of Russell Event Rentals." The spotlight swung to our table. The applause was loud. Caleb whistled. My parents stood up, their faces arranging themselves into masks of humble gratitude. I watched them walk to the stage. They shook the director's hand. They accepted a glass plaque. My father leaned into the microphone. "Thank you," he said, his voice trembling with emotion. "Thank you so much. We believe in this community. We believe in investing in the future. That is why we started our business, to build something that lasts, to give back." My mother wiped a tear from her eye. "It is all for the children," she murmured into the mic. The director smiled. "And we want to specifically thank you," he said, "for your platinum-level sponsorship of $25,000 to the Young Entrepreneurs Scholarship Fund. That donation will change lives." $25,000. The number hung in the air. I felt a coldness spread through my chest that was absolute. Ms. Vance had sent me the records at noon. I knew exactly where the $42,000 from the fraudulent loan had gone. $10,000 had gone to pay off my father's gambling debt. $5,000 had gone to the Super Bowl party catering and supplies. $2,000 had gone to a lease down payment on the SUV. And $25,000 had been written as a check to this charity. They hadn't stolen the money to survive. They hadn't stolen it to keep the lights on. They had stolen my credit, my identity, and my future to buy a plaque, to buy a moment in a spotlight, to buy the appearance of being the kind of people who could donate $25,000. They were standing on stage, receiving applause for being generous, using money they had committed a felony to obtain. It was the ultimate performance, and I was the unwilling producer. I didn't scream. I didn't flip the table. I stood up. I walked quietly away from the table, toward the back of the room where the event staff were standing. Caleb grabbed my wrist as I passed. "Where are you going?" he hissed. "Sit down. They are looking at us." I pulled my wrist free. "I'm going to correct the record," I said. I walked to the sound booth. A woman with a headset was standing there, holding a clipboard. She looked like the event coordinator. "Excuse me," I said. She turned. She looked stressed. "Yes. Can I help you? The program is live, so I need you to pause the presentation." I said, "I am sorry." She looked at me like I was crazy. "I can't do that." "Who are you?" "I am Violet Russell," I said, "the daughter of the people on stage. And I have documentation here proving that the $25,000 donation they just announced was made using funds obtained through identity theft and wire fraud, in my name." The woman stopped. She looked at my face. She saw the total lack of hysteria. She saw the cold, hard certainty. She looked down at the papers I was holding. The top one was the fraud affidavit Ms. Vance had drafted. I am asking you to handle this quietly, I said, but if you let them continue to accept credit for a donation that is currently evidence in a criminal investigation, your organization becomes complicit in the laundering of those funds. The word laundering got her attention. She spoke into her headset. Jerry, hold the music. Cut the feed to the main screen. She looked at me. Come with me, she said. She led me to the side of the stage. The applause was dying down. My parents were still standing there, holding the plaque, looking confused because the exit music hadn't started. The director looked over at the coordinator. She signaled him. He stepped away from my parents and walked over to us. What is going on? He whispered, looking annoyed. This is Ms. Russell, the coordinator said. She claims the donation funds are compromised. I handed the director the bank record. This is the account the check came from. I said, pointing to the line item, this is the federal default notice for that account, listing it as a fraudulent line of credit opened in my name without my consent. My lawyer filed the initial report this afternoon. The director looked at the paper. He looked at the account number on the check he was holding in his mind. He looked at my parents, who were now shifting uncomfortably on stage, the smiles starting to slip. Is this true? He asked me. Yes, I said. They stole $42,000 from me to play rich. You are holding stolen property. The director went pale. He walked back onto the stage. He didn't go to the microphone. He went to my father. He leaned in and whispered something. I saw my father's face collapse. It wasn't a slow realization. It was a sudden, structural failure. His jaw dropped. He looked at the director. Then he looked at the side of the stage. He saw me standing there in my black dress. The microphone was still hot. This is a misunderstanding, my father said. His voice boomed through the speakers. It was loud, panicked. Violet, Violet. Tell him. The room went silent. 500 heads turned. My mother grabbed the microphone. My daughter is confused, she cried. Her voice shrill. She has been having mental health issues. She is off her medication, Violet. Honey, please go back to the hotel. I stepped out from the wings. I didn't go to the center stage. I stood on the floor, looking up at them. I am not confused. Mom, I said. My voice wasn't amplified, but in the dead silence of the ballroom, it carried. I held up the folder. I have the DocuSign audit trail. I said, I have the IP logs from your house. I have the emails where you admitted to using my name because it's all family money. Violet. Stop, Caleb shouted from the table. He was standing up, his face purple. You are ruining everything. Why are you doing this? You are just doing this to punish us. He was pointing a finger at me. The accusation hung in the air. Punish us. I looked at him. I looked at my parents, clutching their glass plaque like a life preserver. I looked at the crowd of strangers, the people whose approval my family had traded my life to earn. I didn't leave to punish you, Caleb. I said, I looked directly at my mother. I left to survive your expectations. I dropped the folder on the edge of the stage. The evidence is all there. I said to the director, you can keep the money or return it to the bank, but if you keep it, you will be named in the subpoena on Monday. I turned around. The silence was excruciating. It was the sound of a carefully constructed world shattering into a million pieces. I could hear my mother sobbing into the microphone, a raw, ugly sound that nobody tried to stop. I heard my father shouting at the director, threatening to sue, his bluster sounding thin and pathetic. I heard Caleb calling my name. Violet. You come back here. You ungrateful. I didn't stop. I didn't run. I walked. I walked past table 12. I walked past Mr. Henderson, whose mouth was hanging open. I walked past the check-in girls, who were staring at me with wide, frightened eyes. I walked out the double doors. I walked through the lobby. I walked out into the cold night air. My car was waiting. I got in. I shut the door. The sound of the latch clicking shut was the loudest sound I had ever heard. I sat there. I waited for the tears. I waited for the shaking to stop. I waited for the triumphant cinematic music to swell. telling me that I had won, that I was free, that justice had been served. It didn't come. My hands were trembling so hard I couldn't put the key in the ignition. My chest hurt. I felt sick. I felt hollowed out, scraped clean, like a building that had been gutted by fire. I had destroyed them. I had done exactly what I said I wouldn't do. I had humiliated them in front of everyone they knew. I had exposed their lies. I had likely ensured my father would face charges, or at least bankruptcy. But as I sat there, watching the valet bring a car around for a couple who were leaving early, probably to gossip about the scene they had just witnessed, I realized something. I hadn't destroyed them. They had destroyed themselves. They had built a house of cards on a foundation of my spine. And when I finally stood up, gravity did the rest. I looked at the convention center one last time. I could see shadows moving in the windows. I could imagine the chaos. I didn't want to see it. I didn't want to hear the apologies, or the excuses, or the rage. I finally managed to start the car. I didn't go back to the hotel. I drove to the airport rental return. I changed my flight. There was a red-eye leaving for Port Haven at 1 a.m. I boarded the plane. I took my seat. I turned off my phone as we lifted off, leaving the lights of my hometown behind for the second and final time. I didn't look back. I looked forward, into the dark, empty sky. I was broke. I was alone. I had a lawsuit to manage and a family that would hate me for the rest of their lives. But for the first time in 33 years, the name on my ticket was the only one I was carrying. Thank you for listening to Violet's story. Writing this journey of breaking free from toxic family expectations was an emotional ride, and I hope it resonated with you. It is a reminder that sometimes the hardest person to save is yourself. I would love to hear your thoughts. Where are you listening from? Have you ever had to set a boundary that felt impossible? Please share your stories in the comments below. I read every single one. If you want to hear more stories about people reclaiming their lives, please subscribe to Revenge Stories. There are many more truths waiting to be told. Take care of yourselves.